Okay, so one of my coworkers, not coworkers, what is Elliot? Elliot is a guru in the Domo community. I don't know. He posted in Slack and asked, what do people use Domo Jupyter for? Um, and why don't we use automation tools like Make? And honestly, I think Make is a great tool. There's many companies that are slowly adopting it. For myself and the company that I work at, we're very reluctant to embrace software that we haven't written ourselves. So that's a whole conversation for another time. Um, but one of the things I said to Elliot was, I was like, Domo, I think is really pushing AI and like data science. But let's be honest, a lot of companies that use Domo are doing data science elsewhere, or maybe just aren't at a place for using Python for data science. And I think one of the big overlooked uses of Python is this ability to automate what we do in Domo. And a very real use case that actually came up this week at work was we had a bunch of duplicate groups that we needed to delete. So, okay, first off, Jay, what do you call a duplicate group? Well, you know how in Domo, um, you can't have two groups with the same name, and if you do try to create a group with the same name, it'll add like that parentheses 3 at the end. Well, those are all duplicates. How they got there, different conversation, but how could I automate deleting any duplicate groups? Well, I think this is a trick. When you're stepping into automation, it's really helpful to try to think through the process. Oh, by the way, my name's Jay Wilson. I'm a content developer at Data Crew. This code will be posted on GitHub. It is going to use a library that I use every day to do Domo automation, which is available for free for you guys. If you like what you see, like and subscribe to all the things. But again, let's get into this tutorial. When you're thinking about automation, I think it's most helpful to try to chunk things into bite-sized parts. So like if you were going through the user interface, how would you go about identifying a bunch of duplicate groups? You might go into Domo, and you might go and find a place where you can see a list of all of your groups, and you might apply a filter that says, search for anything that has that open parentheses. Now, for whatever reason, Domo's user interface isn't applying that filter, but searching for that open parentheses might help me identify duplicates. And then I would delete each duplicate one at a time. I obviously don't have time to do anything one at a time, so let's take a look at how the Domo group library can help me get this job done. Now in this library, there is a class called Domo group. Let's see what's in here. Do I have find? No, get all. I have get all groups. Do I have a delete function? Yes. Um, do I have a create? I do. Hey, cool. So I think I can use Domo group to get the whole thing done. And I picked this use case because it was relatively easy to tackle. But let's look at some of the criteria for what we'll call good code implementation. We're going to use the list comprehension to um, apply the account match regex expression to find any groups whose name matches any of the account match criteria. We're going to write a function that receives a parameter is test is true. And if test is true, we're going to return a data frame. If test is false, we're actually going to delete the group. We'll use this class. Great, let's get started. Step one, pip install DomoLibrary. Do an upgrade if you haven't done it recently, because currently we're on version 3.36. I think I've committed probably 5 or 6 versions in this past week alone in terms of adding functionality and doing bug fixes. So it's a really good idea to stay on top of your upgrades. Okay, first things first, let's build a function that will handle the regex part. So I have here some test values, SDK alphabet 3, SDK underscore group, SC group underscore 1. Now for our purposes, we'll define the reg expression to say starts with SDK underscore, has a space, open parentheses in the string. I'm not great at writing regex. In fact, I literally went to ChatGPT and was like, ChatGPT, write this for me. And it did the thing. Cool. So let's see what that implementation will look like. Again, if you break this down into bite-sized parts, guys, I think a lot of this will be very doable. If you write a Google search for how do I use regex to apply to a string, right? It might write a function for you. And it did. So I have test regex is a function that receives a text string. It also receives a list of regex expressions, and it will return Boolean. I think it's really good practice to use typing to say what your function expects and what your function is going to return. So I have, um, taking my regex list and I'm joining it with these text to create the master regex expression. And then all we're going to do is we're going to say return a Boolean um, where we do the match expression, where we apply this regex expression to this string. One of the things I also like to do when I write code is compartmentalize it. So I'm going to compartmentalize it to allow me to test my code. So I have a list comprehension that says for each value in my list of test values, run the test regex function. And we get true, false, false. Let's see. So yes, this is a duplicate. That is not a duplicate. That is also not a duplicate because it ends with _1, not space open parentheses. Great, so that test is done. How are we going to handle authentication is the next question. You can use a .env file. Please don't store your passwords in clear text. That's a very noob thing to do. But I'm going to use Domo's technology. So I'm going to use an account object that's stored. JW creds has my username and password. And I think I can do credentials. And then I can say Domo username is equal to credentials, Domo username, credentials, Domo password. Oops. What type is credentials going to be when it loads in? Type of credentials. Man, if only I could actually type. The type of credentials is string. So I need to load this as a JSON. Okay, now it's of type dictionary and the rest of my code will work. Great. So now I've stored Domo username and Domo password as variables. I can test this by using the assert function. Assert that Domo username is a value. Assert that Domo password is a value. And obviously it doesn't print because I don't want to print my username on the internet, or rather my password. Okay. To handle authentication in Domo, there's been a million videos about this in the past, so I'm going to fly through this. We're going to use a Domo Auth module from DomoLibrary, and it has a class called Domo Full Auth that receives a Domo username, password, and instance. Now, test instance is in full caps, and the reason why I did that is because at the top, test instance is a constant that you can supply for your implementation. So I have a method called printIsToken, which will validate that this combination of values will produce an access token from your instance, and I got a success is true. If it didn't, it would throw an error. Great. Config company list. So the way in the work that I do, I have to run the same code against tens, sometimes hundreds of Domo instances. And so what I do is I build a data frame called company config list that has a list of auth objects for each instance, as well as some configuration settings that impacts the code that I'm running. For this sample, what we're doing is we're just creating a quick data frame that has two columns, instance auth and Domo instance. We're passing in that auth object we just generated against the test instance. And you know what? I could actually parameterize this, and I could say is test is false, true. We're going to make it true. Okay, so config company list would contain like 20 or 30 rows, but for our example, it just contains one row. And for code development, I have a test row that chooses one row from the config list that will provide my instance auth, Domo instance, and whether or not I want to run a test. Great. Let's get to it. Again, when you're stepping into Python, break your work down into small steps and decide which functions should handle which steps. We already wrote a function that will handle regex. Let's write a function that will get and filter Domo groups. So it will receive an auth object, and it's going to return a list of Domo groups. It's going to be an async function. All right, let's get to it. So dmg dot domo groups dot get all groups. Auth is equal to auth. It's going to return a list of Domo group. We need to Domo groups is equal to await, and we're going to return Domo groups. Let's implement a test. So my test is going to be await the function passing in auth is equal to test row dot instance auth. Already throwing an error. DMG is not defined. Yeah, okay. Import Domo library dot classes dot Domo group as DMG. Okay, so right away we can see, aha, this is a list of Domo group, but it is not filtered. So let's apply that filtered list. So how do I do that? Domo group is equal to for Domo group in Domo groups. We're going to apply our test if test regex Domo group name matches, what was it called? Account match. Now, instead of having this constant embedded inside of my function, I will tell it to pass a regex list. Regex list is going to be a list of strings. Okay, but I have not added a default parameter, so I need to tell it to pass in account match. And I need a comma. And I have a syntax error here. Oh. Okay, so this is a list comprehension that says for Domo group in Domo groups, for each group in Domo groups, if it passed this test, so if this returns a true or false, then return Domo group, the whole thing. And what are you unhappy about? Positional argument follows a keyword argument. Oh. Does it work? Goodness. Test regex got an unexpected value. I should have passed. Test regex is expecting something called test string. Okay. Okay. So it's telling me that there's only one Domo group that matches my criteria for duplicates. I did set up a function up here for populating some duplicate values. So let me throw some more duplicate values in here. What are you unhappy about? Group 1 already exists. Okay, so don't pass in group 1. And now those are going to exist. Please stop. Okay. So now I should have more duplicate values or duplicate groups. So these all pass my regex criteria. Fantastic. So now that I have a function that will get all of my Domo groups and apply the filter, that's like one compartmentalized thing that I can test, let's move on to the main show, which is how are we going to process an instance auth. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, Domo groups, maybe I'll call it filtered. No, I'm just going to call it Domo groups. Domo groups is equal to get and filter Domo groups, passing in auth is equal to instance auth. Sorry, headphones decided to turn off. Auth is equal to instance auth. Regex ls is equal to regex ls. Are those the two parameters that I can pass? Yes. Okay, and then we're just going to return Domo groups, and let's construct our test. Process instance passing in instance auth is equal to test row dot instance auth. Do you see the way I'm making all of this like compartmentalized and testable? Right now, process instance doesn't do anything that get and filter Domo groups doesn't do, but remember the result of this function should be a data frame. So I'm going to use this function to shape the results that I get from my API stuff into the format that my end users want to see, which is basically either give me a data frame of groups to delete or the results of running the delete operation. Domo instance is equal to test row dot Domo instance is test is equal to, I'm going to hard code this as true. And my regex ls is equal to account match. I'm actually going to remove this from having a default value. What did I do wrong? Yes. This needs to come first. How do we do? Is test, what don't you like? I need a comma. Okay, so this is a coroutine. I need to await. Because get and filter Domo groups is an asynchronous function, I need to await it. Cool. So now I'm just returning Domo groups, but I said in my return statement, I don't want to return Domo groups. I actually want to return a data frame. So let's go ahead and just create a data frame. So let's see, what fields do we want to have? We'll have a field called group name, which will be Domo group.name. We'll have group type, which is Domo group.type. And let's include the Domo instance. So Domo instance is equal to Domo group.auth.Domo instance. That is the dictionary. And we need to, for Domo, this is our list comprehension now, for Domo group in Domo groups. And that will be our data frame, return df. Cool. So that's nice. Now, I need a way of differentiating between if I run a test, just return the data frame. If I'm not running a test, if this is live, then actually delete the thing. So let me write a function that says if is test, then just return the data frame. Otherwise, let's just make sure that does what we expect it to do. So is test is equal to true, so we should do that. If test is equal to false, you deleted stuff. Great. All right. So how do I delete stuff? There is a method called delete in each group. So I can run a function that says Domo group dot delete, and that's going to be a list comprehension for each Domo group in Domo groups. Now, Domo group dot delete is an asynchronous function, so I could write it as await, but this would run synchronously one after another. Instead, typically you would write asyncio.gather, and this would allow, if I ran it this way, it would say, for each group in Domo groups, start them all off at the same time and try to delete all of them. Now the problem here is if Domo groups was a list of like 1,000 groups, it would literally start 1,000 API requests at the same time, which is theoretically fine, but it could sink Domo's battleship. Just for the sake of like preventing us from like really slamming Domo's APIs, we might want to say, hey, can I, instead of running all 1,000 at the same time, let's limit ourselves to just at most 10 concurrent actions. So I wrote a function called gather with concurrency that will allow up to n equals 10 asynchronous transactions. But I don't actually want to do the delete event right now, so I think just for development purposes, I'm going to write, we're going to return an f string containing I deleted Domo group.id. Is that going to work? Is test is equal to false? Na. What are we excited about? Because this isn't an await expression. You're not going to let me do that, really? Well, I don't know how to turn that asynchronous, so I guess we just have to leave the delete in here and set this to true. Okay. Ba. So that gives me a list of results. Now I still need to return a data frame. So what I will say is return, no, I'll say data frame dot is deleted is equal to, this is not one response, this is a list of API responses. So I can say res.response for res in res ls. For each response, in my list of responses, get the response text and store that as a column in the data frame. I should probably add some tests, right? What if there were no duplicate groups? So I'll say df is equal to pd.dataframe with the format of columns equals group name, group type, and Domo instance. Okay, that's going to be the basic data frame. And if Domo groups dot length, nope. If the length of Domo groups is equal to 0, then just return an empty data frame. Otherwise, this is the new shape of the data frame. If it's a test, return just the test results. If it's not a test, go ahead and actually run the delete method and then set is deleted equal to the response and then return the data frame. All right, we're going to run this as is test equals true just to make sure it still works. And let's set this as false. So we deleted a ton of stuff. Let me reset my test one more time. So I'm going to say these are my test values. I'm going to say create these test values. So it's going to quickly create those values, and then it's immediately going to turn around and delete them. Boom, boom, boom. So that works the way we expect it to. Nice. And for main, let's take a look at what main does. Remember we said in the beginning, config company list is a list of all of the instances that I need to run my code against, right? And again, from the automation perspective, I don't want to modify my code a million times. So config company list has, for each row, it has a valid instance auth object. I'm actually not using the field domo instance, so that could be removed. But then I'm passing is test true or false. I get a bunch of responses, which are a list of data frames, and then I'm running pd concat on all my data frames. So maybe it would be more descriptive to call this a data frame list, and that's going to be what I return. Why am I throwing an error? Because those groups already exist. Okay, so I'm going to remove my create group event. I'm going to say is test is equal to false. Process instance is missing regex list. Okay. Process instance is missing regex ls is equal to account match. Boom. So it does a thing, right? And again, if I had 20 or 30 instances I needed to run this against, it would run dynamically against all of those instances and reproduce a data set that I could then save into Domo in like a log file of some sort. I hope you guys found this tutorial useful. If you did, like, subscribe, do all the things. If you didn't, tell me why. I'd love to know. Go forth, do great things, have fun. Catch you guys later. Bye.